And we'll get going. I'm going to maximize this now. Okay. And I'll get up to Visual Studio. Okay. I'll also open the assignment so we can look at it. This one says I've never used it. I wasn't sure which version I'd used, but that's fine. I have 2 copies of the same. And I will wait for the card to pass. Yeah. So it should be, do you have a complete version of SQL Server or the Express? So dot backslash. See, make the slash the other way. SQL Express. We are. We will, not today, but we will add some databases. Probably next week, because the next assignment we'll use them. Yeah. I want the 2017 version. This is not my. Let me go down. The 2015 version is actually just attached to SQL Server, and it only has some data things. So if you want to do an integration project where you're creating a complicated import or export package, or if you want to do business intelligence, they're only SQL Server projects. They're not. So the 17 is what I want. Visual Studio, when you do SQL Server, and you add the data tools, it usually installs a version of Visual Studio that's like a version before the current one, just because they're out of sync in their development cycles. SQL Server tends to come out before the Visual Studio one does. So where did you see the little flag? Oh, up here? Yeah. All right, so we need to, I'll tell them. Hopefully they can fix that before the weekend. All right, so let me bring up just the assignment, and then we will be ready to go. So I am going to do, so Canvas. Okay, and I'll make this a little bit bigger. So let's go to 172. And this is very much like what I did last time. So it's called First Look is the first assignment. And it basically says, let me make this bigger. We're going to make a new project. We're going to do an MVC, Model View Control Project. We're going to create a class called mailing that contains the first name, last name, and address as fields, email address. All right, it's just going to be real simple. It's very similar to what I did, just sort of as shown to last time. we're going to create a controller class that uses the model, and then we'll create a view. So basically, we're going through that process. The one thing that we'll add when we start the next assignment is we're going to, instead of making a model class that just isn't any, it's just a storage thing, we'll actually make it so that it's related to the database. That's what we'll do next time. But this time, we're just going to walk through creating a model, creating a controller, creating a view. I will show you, I will post mine on GitHub, and I'll show you how to do. And you can just link, basically, you can just link a website URL to Canvas, and Canvas works really well with GitHub. It does. I can, with just a click, get to the GitHub site and take a look at things, and it'll also give you something up on GitHub. How many of you have GitHub accounts? Pretty much everybody. Anyone not? It's not hard to set one up. They're free. As long as your repositories are public, they're free. And as a student, I think you can get, what, couple of repositories private? I always just leave them public. I'm not putting this stuff up there that's going to change the world.
I think you have to pay for privacy.
Even as a student?
No, the student benefit. What they give you as a student is free private.
But if you don't sign up, you probably have to go through something to prove you're a student. If you don't bother with that, you have as many free public repositories as you want. Public repositories are free. And the thing about GitHub is that it's an industry standard. If you go to apply for work at Amazon or anywhere, the very first thing they're going to do is go to your GitHub and take a look at what you got there. Okay, so those are the things that we're going to do. Now, I think I may have, let's hope all this works. I'm going to zoom so you can see this a little better. All right, so I'm going to do File, New, Project. And we have all these different things. Notice it went down to ASP.NET Web Application. That's because I was there before. But that's what we're going to do for all of these assignments. We're just going to go down to ASP.NET Web Application. I'm going to give it a name this time for sure because, and actually remind me, one of the things I want to show you is where these files go, right? If you're going to upload it to GitHub, you need to know that. Also, it's not always obvious where they are. And this makes a ton of files. It actually, you may have to upload it to GitHub initially in chunks, depending on what mechanism you use, because it's so big. So I'm going to call it first. I called it first look in GitHub. So in Canvas, so I'll call it that here too. Really a good idea to name this, just because. What do I want to say? Just because it will be hard to find them later if you don't. If you have Web Application 1, Web Application 2, Web Application 3, it gets really confusing to figure out which is what.
What's the 461? That's the framework.
That's the current framework. So one of the things you can do, you can go up. Typically what they do is the current active framework. Some of these other frameworks, the .1, .7 are out there, but they're not generally distributed. Does that make sense? You can also go backwards. And backwards is probably more typical because you might be working for a company that hasn't installed the most recent frameworks. Typically, the newer frameworks are part of the Microsoft download stuff that you get without asking. But companies can control that. And one of the things they do is if they have a framework that works, they're a little reluctant to add a new version of the framework in case it breaks things. I haven't had much experience of a new framework breaking the old ones, but I'm sure it can happen. It can happen.
Can you have multiple frameworks?
Yes, you can actually. And there are some things that require a specific framework where you can download the old framework, and yes, you can have more than one version. So we'll go with the default there. These are sorted by default. You can change the sorts, right? You could put the name ascending or descending. The default, I think, is by usage. I have no idea why they're in this order by default. So we want the ASP.NET web application. Is there anything else here?
How is the name different from the solution?
So the solution name will be the same as, notice they are the same.
Right. What are they?
So the solution is, it could be a different solution name. Let me do an OK and I'll tell you, I'll show you. So we're going to do NVC, make sure NVC is checked. I'm going to do OK. Notice you can, I don't know that we'll do this, but you can add unit tests to this project. That would add to our complexity, so I'm going to avoid it for right now. But unit tests are a good thing to learn. You know, they're just basically you test all your methods to see if they work. And they give you a way to do it in a more formal. The solution thing I'm going to show you in just a second. Slowly, slowly. It is making a lot of stuff. All right, so we have the solution. It gives you this sort of pseudo web page, and it gives you all this stuff that we talked about before. Notice that there's a solution first look, and then the first look is also the project name. They don't have to be the same. Inside the solution, you can have multiple projects. Does that make sense? So this might be, say you were making a some server-side code and client-side code, and they're both part of the same solution, but they're different projects. Does that make sense? You can, I mean, and if a thing has like, you want to build some libraries and make them a different solution and stuff, there's all sorts of, it's fairly common. I've even, although I'm not sure I'd suggest it, sometimes for my sample ones that I do, you could have them loaded and yours at the same time so that you could go back and forth and look at them. It can get a little confusing. All right. I'm going to walk through here again real quickly just to say some of the stuff that you get. There's a whole bunch of references. What these references are references to .NET libraries. For the most part, you can ignore them unless you have some really terrible errors. Okay. So, and then the app data is for if you have a local database, which we do not. App start is basically just some C# files that start the program when you're running it.
You don't have a solution explorer in your upper right corner.
Server Explorer. Oh, so, and I should have a solution. Well, I have the toolbox.
Is that on the right-hand side of Solution Explorer?
Yeah, it's over here. Yeah. So if you don't have, if there's any window missing, you can always get them from View. And as I showed you before, I think you can float any of these windows however you want. Some people like them floating. To me, it doesn't make sense to float them unless you've got multiple monitors. But you can float them. All you have to do is, I'll take the Server Explorer, for instance. You can just drag it, and it's out there floating. You can put them, you can rearrange them anywhere you want. You can dock them anywhere you want. I'm going to highlight this, and I think I have to, you see that little cross there? It's kind of telling you where you want to, you choose where you want to dock it. So I'm going to dock it back over to the side. It takes a while to get the hang of that, though. And sometimes it's a real pain when you got something floating by accident, trying to get it back where you want it to go. And anything can be pinned or unpinned to show up. Even the Solution Explorer, you can get rid of these. They're still there, but can I get them? They're off. Can I get them on screen? No. They are off screen, but they're right along the side there. You know, and you can always get them back. The Solution Explorer basically keeps track of what folders and files you've got. Okay, so we don't have much in the start. Controllers are what we're going to focus on. Controllers, models. There's nothing in the models there. There is a controller. The home controller is there. Under views, there's a home, right? And under home, there's about, contact, and index. They give you those when you do the template. Just real quickly, under scripts, you have the Bootstrap and jQuery. Again, when you're doing the template, you get the Bootstrap and jQuery for free. If you want to do an empty one, you can. And once you get the hang of it, you might actually prefer to do an empty one, just because they give you so much here. And it's all bootstrapped for everything has this Bootstrap look and feel, which if you don't like that, you can change it. Okay, are we ready for the actual doing something? I am going to, we'll start with the model. And we did this last time, but I'm going to add, and what I want to add to the model is a class. So we're going to do a C# class. And I know a lot of you haven't had a lot of C# and are worried about the C#, but as I said, I'll walk you through it. So, and I'm going to name this class, I guess I'll just call it mailing. I could call it mailing list. Doesn't matter too much what you name it. So I just named it mailing.
So after you add,
I hit class. Add class.
there isn't a class.
There should be. Yeah, it might be somewhere else. I think mine is up because I did it last time.
Straight out.
Yeah. Is it grayed out?
Straight out.
Are you on model? Right click on model. Oh, you're running. So it should allow you to run. One of the things that I have trouble with too sometimes is you can close everything down and it's still running. And the only way you know is that little square up at the top is red. And then there are things you can't do when it's running, like add classes. So I'm adding the mailing. And so I'm going to add it. And when I add it, I'm in Zoom, so it's over here and it's very big.
That was assembly information file.
Yeah, so say again.
On the selection of, I think you highlight assembly information file.
Oh, you want class. This class. Might be further down.
So it's up.
At the top.
Okay.
All right. So we talked about this a little bit. We have the system things. These are just like imports in Python, or doesn't Java use import also? Yeah, I'm trying to remember. This isn't the namespace we talked about. Namespace is just a container. Everything has the namespace of the solution in the project. It has in the namespace, we have the models folder. So it basically says that it's in the models. And then we have the public class mailing, which we haven't filled out, but it's just an empty thing. Yeah.
One quick question about the using, in other languages, there's a way to specify only certain methods or functions out of the library that you're going to import. This looks like it just imports the entire library.
I think you can, like if I were to go here and do dot,
I see. So it's
it gives you, you can go a little farther out and get, okay.
this is better.
They're all grayed out, as I said, because right now we're not doing anything that requires anything from any of them. Right. So what I'm going to do, this is again the shorthand, and generally we will do this because we're just creating a class that's a bundle, something to store stuff. And what it's going to store is a first name, last name, and email. So I'm just going to do first name, and then I'm going to do get set. And as I said, no other language that I know does this, but this just gives you a shorthand for your getters and setters. It will generate them for you. Now in Java, at least in a lot of IDEs, you can just right click on your field and it'll say generate getters or setters and it'll write the code for you, but it does write actual methods. This does this on the compiler level. It actually does what the methods are supposed to do, but you can get away with just writing get set. And if you look at the data classes, in all of the Microsoft examples, they do this, and why not? It's so much less typing. If you like, you can write your getters and setters or your properties. Other things, if you're only used to Python doesn't really specify like public string. Public means that it's available to any other class that calls this class. Public means that any other class in the project can see it. Also, possibly even a class outside the project. There are some intermediates you could use. String tells you what the data type is. You always have to give a thing a data type. In C#, it's type safe, so you always have to give a type. For these properties, for these getters and setters, the convention is to do them in caps. Again, it's a Microsoft convention. Yeah.
What's the equivalent of get set in Python? Like what's the word?
It doesn't seem to have that. You could write a get method, right? You could write a method that says get first name, right? And then it just would return the first name. And then you would have a set first name, and it would take in a parameter that allows you to change it. So I think you just write it in set fields as you do. It doesn't really have a public because everything sort of, it reads it down line by line the way that it does it. I don't know of a way for it to specify scope like that. There may be. It does have a self thing when you're inside of a class. If you say that you want a thing to be a class level variable, you have to say that it's self, that belongs to it. Python to me is weird, but I'm learning it because it's the popular language for a lot of stuff right now. And Stanley loves it. I have a mixed relation with it, but Stanley loves it. So I'm just going to do the same thing. All of these will be string. So last name. And as I said, this is a shorthand. It's a little bit weird. I don't know of any other language that has this shorthand, but it does make life easier.
Should the N be capitalized in last name as well?
It should be. Again, it won't. It actually works whatever your capitalization. It's just.
Separate those with line.
No.
You obviously don't, but I find that.
Well, so you're doing a semicolon for these. for the get and set methods, but this is defining the blocks, right?
Okay, I get you.
Yeah. Curly braces are used to define blocks. In Python, it's by indentation. Actually, Java does exactly the same with how you define the blocks. And then I'm just going to do email and get set. Now it is case sensitive. If something doesn't come up blue or something where it should, it's usually because you capitalize something that you shouldn't. Other questions on this? Because this is actually our whole class for right now. Yeah.
Can you define a constructor on this, or?
You can actually. You can. It's not typical to have a constructor with these data classes, but you could. So if you wanted to do a constructor, it would be, I'm going to make it and delete it. But you could do public mailing. And this would be like an empty constructor, but you could add, string first, string second, string email, and you could do first name equals first. Yeah, I mean, you could do that. Does that make sense? You could do that for all of that. I might actually, well, I'm going to let that go, but it would work. It would make it just to give you another way to enter things. That's a good question. As I said, the data classes typically don't have constructors, but they can have. Other questions before I move on to the next part? Okay, you guys are all good? These are good questions. I always ask for questions. I want you to kind of understand, yeah.
Static? Is that also?
You can do static. I don't know how static works in the web environment, but yeah. It is a keyword that you can use. It's actually a good question. I've never thought about how that works because memory is protected in a web environment, but these would actually be loading on the server, so it might be able to make them static. I don't see static much here. You do see static when you're writing for a Windows app and things. So I just don't know if there's any rule against it or they just don't do. Yeah, I'll have to look at that. All right, so we're done with our model. And you can leave the tabs up here if you want, or you can close them. The other thing, let's get my Solution Explorer open. Notice that we have the mailing CS. It shows up underneath there now. And if you open that little thing, it shows you can actually work your way down to, this is the class, these are where it has the little wrench, those are properties, and it gives you the data type for them. So you can get some information just from the Solution Explorer. This can be useful when you're dealing with the database auto-generated classes, because you might need to know what the data types are and things like that. The other thing we talked about real quickly last time is that if I name this, if I change the name here, it doesn't change the name of the class, right? The file name is separate from the class name. So I would have to change, if I want to change it in both places, I'd have to change it here and here. Some names you really want to be careful changing. The project name and the solution name, you can change them, but they are referenced all over the place, and changing them doesn't necessarily cascade through everything. So sometimes you can kill a project by renaming something. Or you might spend hours trying to figure out where every reference is. Okay, so let's go to controllers. So we're going to add a controller. That makes sense? Typically, this is what we will do. This is sort of the pattern. We'll build the model. Later, we'll build the model from, we'll use the data entities wizards to build the models. And then we'll modify things a little bit in there. And then I'll build the controllers, okay? And typically you build the controllers and then build the view. So there's a pattern. It usually works best if you follow that order. You don't have to. You could theoretically make the view before you make the controller and stuff, but you don't have anything to refer to. So it's a little bit weird. So I'm just going to do add. And one of the things you can do is you can add a controller, which is what we want to do. Now you could add an empty class and make it a controller by adding the right libraries and the inheritance, but it's just easier to have a controller to start with. You have lots of options here. We're going to go with empty. We will once do an MC5 controller with read and write. What happens is if you're using like a database table, you can automatically create the entire CRUD, you know, read, create, insert, update. You know, you can do all of that. It'll generate a form for all of those actions. You know, it's really neat, except it's mostly useless because you really don't want to display things on there. But we'll do that with one of them. But right now we're going to go with empty. There's other things you can do along here too. You can set some actions for it with different kinds of data, but we're mostly going to do just empty ones, and we'll do one of those.
Could you address the differences between the MVC5 and the EPI2 variant?
You know, I am not sure. I was just looking at that and thinking I need to look that up. I think the difference, actually, I'm not entirely sure. I will look that up because if I talk, I'd be just talking off the top of my head. I honestly don't know. Those are fairly new. So I think that Microsoft keeps adapting its structures to be more like open source structures. And increasingly, they actually do open source structures. I know these OData things, which I'm not going to go to, but they're actually kind of interesting. I just need to explore them before I can go show them. Are for if you're running JSON as your main data. These, what we're going to work with are going to be relational data and from SQL Server. So anyway, I'm going to do an empty controller. I want to give it a name. Where's the name? Oh, I have to do add first. Okay. Then it gives me the name. And it's important what you name these. So I'm going to call it mailing controller. And one reason why it's important what you name them is it will create a folder under views that will be the same name as the controller, right? So a controller always speaks to a view, and that's what we're getting there. There aren't any views there because we're using an empty controller, but we will add a view there next. But first we'll do this. So notice it's the same namespace except .controllers. Again, the folders structure is really important here. It's using the folder structure to find things on the server. If you've done any Android, it's just like that for Android too. Everything's broken out into separate folders. You know, even your strings are in a string folder. You know, you bring them up. We got a public class, the mailing controller, which is what you name it, and it inherits from controller. So inherits in C# is the colon, same as it is in C++. And Java would be extends. And I forget what it is in Python, you just put the class you're inheriting from in parentheses. But anyway, so we're inheriting from controller. This is a controller. What that means is that it has certain things in it. Like these are keywords that you have to have. Action result. What happens at the end of the action result? Typically, you need to return a view, and the view is going to be the web page. Has to be the name of the web page. Now you can change this if you don't want an index. You could change it to a different name, and if you have more folders, and if you have more web pages in this folder, each one of them would have their own name, right? So if we look over here under home, there's index, and then there's contact, and there's about. And if we were to look at the home controller, you would see there's index, about, and contact. Does that make sense? The names of these different action result methods map directly to a view. So they have to be the same. That's how it works. So let's go back to our own controller. So mostly what I want to do here, this would return an empty view. I mean, it would just return, if you had a view that wasn't reading any data or anything. But we wanted to return some data. So we're just going to hard code the data. Again, this is not how you would usually do it. Usually come from a file or a database. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a directive up here using first look models. Right? That means that it'll have access to the models folder. The alternative to do this is that when I want to call my mailing class, I could say firstlook.models. I mean, you could do that too if you don't want to do a using directive, but the using directive makes the whole models folder available up here. So down here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple of instances of the mailing class. So because I did that directive up there, the using directive, my mailing is teal, right? Teal means it's a class or a method. Teal basically is a good color in here. It means that it found it. If it's black, it means it didn't find it. That's just Visual Studio. That's not, C# necessarily in and of itself. So I'm going to give it a local name. I'm just going to call it M1 equals new mailing. Okay. Now, actually, if I had a constructor, this would be easier to do. So maybe I should have put a constructor in there. All right. So what I'm going to do is M1 dot first name. See how the property works? I can just do first name equals, anybody have a good first name for it? Yeah, I can do that. All right. M1 dot last name. I guess I'll just do me. And again, this is something you would probably never do. It's just hard code these in. But I'm doing it just to get the pattern right now. So we'll do last name, so email. Using the long one. Okay. Anything about that? Oops, that doesn't make sense. So these are the properties we set, right? And they show up when you do it. The M1 is the instance of the class. And then these are properties that belong to it. And we're assigning values to it, which would be the set. The given set, we're using the set at that point. Does that make sense? So I said, we're just going to do this hard coding. And how many do you want? 3. All right, so we'll do this as M2. And it is possible, there is, you can change them. So, anybody? Norman Mailer or normal mailer? Let's make a normal mailer. And I'm just going to do, Gmail is so easy to type is what I usually do it. Okay, so we'll make a third one. And make it a 3. And do I know a Sarah? I'm not sure if I know a Sarah. What? Oh, yeah, I do. I knew it sounded familiar. I haven't seen Sarah for a while, though. Anyway, I'll just do Sarah Jones and just do Sarah at gmail.com. All right, so we have 3 of these. Again, we're hard coding them. But what we need to do is we need to create a list. And the list is going to contain the type mailing. And I'm going to call it mailings equals new list mailing.
So that in the bracket notation there is something I've not seen before.
So it exists in Java 2. It's called generics. So it's a generics because these objects don't have a type until runtime. And what you put in here is the type. So typically in the past, if you wanted, they call it polymorphism, but you wanted a thing to be able to behave with different data types in a strictly typed language like this. Say you wanted, there's 2 ways you could do it. So the list, you could say you could have a list of ints. So you'd have to create one version of list that takes ints. You'd have to write another version that takes doubles. And you'd have to take another version that takes, decimal, right? So you'd have to have multiple versions of the same thing if you wanted it to handle different data types. Another way you could do it is you could do object here. Everything in .NET, and this is true of Java too, everything in Java also, they inherit from an object called object. One of the things of object-oriented programming is that you can always substitute a child for the parent. And since object is the parent of everything, you can literally substitute anything. Does that make sense as object? But that's not very type safe. It's kind of vague. So what happens is this doesn't have a type. But at runtime in these brackets, you give it its type. What kind of list is it? It's a list of names. So those are called generics, and they were introduced 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even a little longer ago than that. And as I said, Java has them too. They have a generic list that you can use.
Just a collection.
It's a collection. It's like an array, except that it doesn't have, you don't have to set a limit. Does that make sense? It's still a 0 indexed list, but it, what?
So instead of you hard coding from the beginning, it's like a little plug-in, scalable, and just like
Yeah.
generate your code.
And you can keep adding to it. Now in technically, like Python doesn't have arrays because they're all lists, because you can just keep adding to them. In Python, you don't have to say when you declare an array that it's going to be 10 values long, or it's going to be 6 values long. But most languages, you have to give a definite size to those. List is a data structure that's like an array. It's actually a little less flexible than an array in the sense that it can't be multi-dimensional. Does that make sense? But it doesn't have any limit to size.
So you couldn't have a list of lists.
You might be able to have a list of lists. That's not really multi-dimensional because a list is an object. So you could, I think, have a list of lists. Although I think it might drive you nuts to have a list of lists. But yeah.
Sorry, question about something earlier. Since we have the controller called Mail Controller,
Sure.
how is it that Picture Studio is pulling mailing? Is there something that we define?
Right. So right at the top, which you might have missed, when I did first look models, mailing is in the models folder. So what this does is it gives the access to the models folder. You have that? Oh.
I do remember that I don't have mailing. I have passport.
Oh, so what you might want to do is
Oh, okay. Should I not rename it because of that one name?
well, so you can rename it if you want. So if you go to the, although that one actually renamed it. Go ahead and do that. And then go to the there and change it to mailing controller. This is
It updated it.
okay.
Okay, that was right.
Okay.
One thing, you're talking about naming convention. If you got something you want to change going bottoms up, that's not too bad, right? But it's top down, that's.
Yeah,
That's
although for and it just did change it. We gave a dialog box, do you want to change this? And it did, so that's a good thing. Where I have found there are some things that are referenced like in JavaScript and things. Typically the C# will update, but it won't always update like the JavaScript and things like that if they're referring to things. All right, so we've got our controller, so we got our list. All right, so what we need to do is we need to add things to the list. So I'm just going to say mailings, which is the list. The only difference is the S. I probably shouldn't name things like that, just for your guys' sake. I'm going to do add. I'm going to add M1. And I'm going to do the same for M2 and M3. So what I'm doing is I'm adding these objects to the list. Again, doing it manually like this is really unlikely in real life. So I took each of those mailing objects and added it to my list of mailings. Now this is the part where some of you, when I was doing the thing the other day, when I do the view, I need to return the list to the view. Otherwise, it won't see anything I did. All right, so when I return the view, I pass it. I'm passing it this list of names. Then you have access to it in the view, and you can manipulate it and do a quick table and things like that. Does that make sense? There are times like we're going to pass things back to the view when it returns the view, and we might go to a view differently, to a different view than the one where we took things in. You know, there are things that we'll do with this return. They always end with return view, but there's different parameters that can be in here. That's the complete, for us, the complete controller. Questions on it before I move? Yeah.
Is the name of this list mailings or mailing?
So mailing is the class and the list is mailings. See how I named it here? I should name them more differently.
So then you did list and you're saying the class is mailing and
The class is mailing and then the list I called mailings. But you could name it something different. There's nothing magic in the names, and I have a really bad habit of naming things too similarly sometimes. I just did this as an S because it's holding many of these. All right. So we're done with the controller, but are there any other questions before we go on? As I said, I know a lot of, probably almost none of you have done C# before. So getting the feel for this is going to take a while. I don't think it's too hard, but the actual syntax I don't think is going to be that difficult, but there's sort of a leap up in the context. It's not stuff we've done, probably done quite like this in any language. So we're okay? All right, so let's go to the view. So down under views, we have a mailing view. So what we want is a new view. There's nothing in it. You can tell because there's no triangle beside it. So I'm going to add, and what I want to add is a view. Now, it's really important when you get the view that you take the name and you change it to whatever method you want to call it. So this one is index.
Isn't it supposed to be one index?
Well, so actually, it's not an uncommon structure that if you have multiple folders, you break your website into folders, that each folder has an index file. So that when you path to it, so if you go to to mailings index, it'll come up automatically. So, and then there's a home index, right? So home is the default one it goes to.
Yeah. You right click on the mailing under views.
Yeah, so you right click on the mailing under views, right click there, add, and we want to add a view, and then we want to change it to index, and we're leaving it empty. There's a lot of stuff that it will do for you, but I think that'll be more confusing. I think it's actually better to work from empty. All right, so I'm going to do add. No, I just did empty. What did it say with empty?
Add the layout, use layout.
So we
Yeah.
want this much, right? We want the view bag in the H2 index, although you don't have to have those, you could add them. We don't actually have anything that we're passing in the view bag anyway, so later we will. View bag is a good way to pass like messages, like thank you for registering, things like that. I am going to add at model, and I'm going to do IEnumerable. Remember, I forgot IEnumerable. A lot of times, once we do the wizard-generated classes, you don't have to do this so much because it includes this method as part of them. I'm going to do the square bracket, and I'm going to say first look, which is our project, dot models dot mailing. This is one of the things that I don't like about, what is it not like there? Oh, it's okay. One of the things I don't like about Microsoft's implementation of MVC is that you have to register the model with the view.
Good square brackets. You sure?
No, I meant these brackets.
Oh, the angle bracket.
Yeah, angle brackets. What are they called as opposed to just brackets? Angle brackets, I guess.
Carrots?
Carrots?
Well, here's
No, that's the
the
vertical.
Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
one.
IEnumerable, yeah.
Sorry, maybe you were getting to it, but what is the INU?
So it's actually not a data type, it's an interface. Does anybody know what an interface is? I mean, as opposed to the type of interface that you work with in terms of a form. This is an interface is like a, they call it a contract. It's basically gives you some methods that have to be implemented. And the advantage of that is that if something implements those methods, you know that they're there, you know you can interact with them. This is really good in object-oriented programming. So a lot of times you'll implement an interface.
So is it like an API kind of?
Kinda. I mean, so if you were working, say you break up the classes, and some people are working on a set of classes over here, and some are working over here, and they need to know that they can have certain methods that they can call. It's basically like an API. The interface, if the interface is present, they know those methods are present. It doesn't say what the content of those methods are. It's a complicated concept, actually,
In
interfaces.
Java, they call objects to stream interface.
Right.
That commits to being able to convert themselves into a string. So
IEnumerable means that you can loop through it. That's all it does. It says that the methods are there. We don't have to do anything with this. I'm not even sure why we have to call that, because the list structure is IEnumerable. Does that make sense? The list structure is loopable, but it doesn't, because of the, it needs to know, for whatever reason, it needs to know that that's there when I'm using my mailing class.
Yeah, an error. It says IEnumerable is a type which is not valid in a given context.
Where do you have it? You have the app model.
Yeah, head model. Then there's this space. And nothing space there. And then there's a space. IEnumerable. So just meaning one segment of something. I'm not sure. Remove it. No.
I think it's you're not supposed to start anything with the name. I'll look at it in a minute. Let me get through and see if we can. Anyone else have that error? Because that's weird that it would have that error.
I have,
You have an error saying it's not allowed in that context?
it says it doesn't.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, that's in there.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, it's in there too.
Yeah. But nobody else does. Why?
There's a technical namespace name, i.e.
It's in a different way.
Should be there. Did you spell it right? The first two letters are count.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Unexpected use of unbound genetic maybe
no. First one.
Another.
Oh,
Let me look at mine. Does anyone else have any errors?
I have some, but I think it's because I took list off. I like renamed it to see what would happen. And
Oh, yeah. Output. Unexpected use of an unbound generic name. All right, let's try it without. I'm almost positive it's going to tell us we have to use IEnumerable. I took IEnumerable out. Let's see if it forces it back. Okay. So this up here is called Razor, and it's a lot like your PHP. If you've done the PHP, you basically are scripting inside of the HTML. You're basically putting code inside of there, and the at basically tells you that it's, Razor is like C# scripting. We're going to do a little bit more down here. I'm going to do a table, and I'm also going to give it a class equals table just because it makes it a prettier table. That's the brain gone, Bootstrap class for table. It'll make it take the whole page. It'll just make it look nice. Don't have to use that, and there are other table formats in Bootstrap you could use, right? Now, I'm going to do it a little different than last time. So I am going to do TR, so table row. If you haven't done any HTML, anybody not done HTML? So everybody's pretty okay with HTML? Okay, good. As I said, one of the hard things about this is that, particularly when we start dealing with the database, you have all the database concepts, you have the HTML, you have CSS, you have the C#, you have all these things going on.
So it sounds like this class is the funnel bucket of everything.
Yeah, there's a lot that comes together. This is true also in the PHP database classes, really, because you have to know the HTML and the PHP and the database, right? So the thing about web development is that it often is given less respect than actual, so-called application development, but it actually has a lot of skill sets that come together in it. It's a fairly complex set of processes. So I'm going to do a TH. And I'm also going to do, so I'm going to do at HTML dot, and I'm going to do display name, and I'm going to do model, and I'm going to use a lambda there, and I'm going to say model dot, well, actually, so would it be the list? No. Might have to look this up. I know how to do it. Just I wonder if I want. Well, we will do the for each loop. I want display HTML. It may be I don't want display name is what I'm thinking. Add HTML dot display name for model, I think. And then the lambda, and then a lowercase model. And it's still not doing it. Let me look. So I'm just going to look at what you get for free. I'm going to go to come on, just display name for model. I wonder if that's what I was doing wrong. It's not giving me the actual content, though, of the model. So it's just display name for, not display name for model. Which is what I had originally. There we are. So we'll do first name, I guess. That's what I was looking for. And I'm going to copy that. So these are table headings. And then this will just be last name
An email.
and then email. Okay. So what this does is it basically just pulls the column name over. You don't always want that. So it's actually going to, the column name is going to be first name, last name, email. You might actually want to display it differently. But I wanted to show how to do this where you just get that. So these are just the headers. And then I'm going to do the at for each var, and I'll just call it, what do I want to call it? Item in model. So for every item in the model, and I'm going to do curly braces. I'm going to do tr, so a table row, and then a table detail, and then I'm going to do at HTML, and that needs to be a capital H on the HTML. Dot, and this one is just display for instead of display name for, and then it has exactly the same content as this, basically. Now, we talked a little bit last time about the lambdas, and basically it refers to an anonymous function. This does. Could take a lot of explanation. They're common in almost all programming languages now, for good or for ill. So actually I did the TDs, but probably the easiest way is just to copy and change it to last name. Oh, except I didn't copy the TD properly. And then so I'll copy again. And I wiped it again. Why did I do that? TD. Today is not my day for cutting and pasting. I just pasted over what I had last time. So it's going to loop through these. All right, so this is just a for each loop. So here's where it says get enumerator. And that's where you have to do the IEnumerable, but it doesn't seem to like that. And it's happy now. Is it happy now here? Oh, well, no, item in model. Is it a lowercase m that I need? No. We did this last time.
I'm having trouble getting it to accept the display name for model. Tells me there is no overload for method takes one argument. Seems like I've got it structured.
Which one is the, so model.first name. Here it doesn't like the IEnumerable does not contain a definition for,
Oh,
Mine says
Never mind.
Oh, you got,
I missed one of your updates. I had displaying came out, not displaying.
our item in model. Why is it not liking that?
Mine says as asking if we're missing a using directive or an assembly reference.
Oh, it shouldn't be. We did this before and it worked. Remember? Last time? I'm just going to look. Did we do what last time was it web application 1 or 2?
2.
I actually don't necessarily want to open that. Let's go to Documents. Visual Studio 2017. No. No. This PC Documents. Where is my Visual Studio project?
So why can't you just say mailing dot person or item dot person?
So
That works. That gets rid of the red line.
if you do which? Oh, you're right. You're right. That's my mistake. Sorry. Let me bring up Visual Studio again. Because we've got item there, it has to be item dot not model this time. That's the problem.
You still have to do the HTML display.
Yes.
Because when I just put item dot first name, it likes it.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if it'll show it. So we'll see if it works.
Fair.
It's because of item in the loop, right? I changed it, the context. Item is what's going to be storing the elements. You could try it. I don't know what it would do with just item dot. Yeah, sure. So there's the IEnumerable, which it wouldn't accept until it demanded it.
No, it shows, it doesn't, it shows the name.
Yeah. So we've got from the top, again, the IEnumerable, at first it didn't like it, but now it's okay with it. Basically, it forced me to put it there after I did the for each, right? Maybe it's because until the for each, it didn't recognize that it needed it. The view bag, we're not really doing much. You could change the title if you want. We did a table. I just wanted to show you this display name for. Once we've done these a few times, a lot of times I copy and paste across things because they're always going to be doing it the same way. When you create a form that's displaying something, if you want to use the headers, what this HTML display for does is it's going to display literally the headers, first name, last name, and email. You don't have to do that. You could just put your own headers in, right? TH. Yeah.
Why is that model lowercase in some cases and uppercase?
It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I think model is the container and the specific model. So models is the folder and model is the specific model. I think that's what they're distinguishing. Does that make sense?
Because mine's capitalized.
Well, so some of them are capitalized, right? Up there, it's models is the folder name.
No, but for me, it's the table class. First one, it's the model is capitalized.
With I'm not sure.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, right there.
Does it work? Here's how you can tell if it's working. I'm going to run this. All right, so slowly it runs. Really slowly. All right, so it did work on mine. Does yours work when you run it?
Yeah.
It did work
Mine's
with,
still not working, same. Go back to the code.
yeah, I will.
Yeah, I still got like a red line on the model for the 4-H.
Yeah, I do too. It says the name model does not exist.
Right, so you have to change it in the 4-H to item.
I did
Yeah.
You
that.
did that one?
Uh-huh,
And you have item up here.
yeah. When I change it to a big M, it says the for each statement cannot operate on variables.
And you have the
And
item
when I put it-
variable, yeah.
And when I put it on the little one, it says.
Right, I think it has to be the capital model for that, for the 4-H. And then, item,
Oh, okay, well, there we go. Now it's happening.
4-H statement cannot operate on variables tied to
so the only other thing it says is that there's a semicolon missing somewhere. Right here.
Yeah. I think that's actually
If you double click it, it'll go there. Not the error,
Oh,
double click the actual white.
right
So,
here.
yeah,
Wait, there's one there.
but there's no close and close.
Oh,
So it's
That's
actually
why.
wrong about the
there it
semicolon.
goes.
That, then it looks good. So if you go back, it should
I
run.
don't know why changing it back and forth from little to big finally made it work.
Was not able to get started because I couldn't. This is.
You know what it might be is if you started,
I opened up the 2017, so I just wasn't able to get started. It's impossible to. Upload it. This is 2017.
yeah. But it didn't have.
Yeah, I didn't have any of that. So I just wasn't able to get started. I was watching.
Okay, I made it go away. I didn't save the prior, on the prior files. Oh man, that is tricky. So what problem you have? You said you had some problem. Yeah, so what, it turned out I didn't save prior files. I guess you should.
Okay.
Right, so, yeah, so that was, yeah, so. You know, I'm pretty good with control. How do you run the thing? Where's the button for that? Oh, okay.
You know what, the sugar and I don't think. Give me a minute, I can have something. If you need to, at some point, I can help out.
For a high click.
Because I think what we're gonna have to do here is just load it.
It's the same issue. We didn't have the old. It just said
Right.
the drink and then blank.
This, I'm not sure this side got updated. Is anybody else having that problem?
If you go into tools.
Yeah, you can update the tools. That's what I was going to do.
That took like an hour and a half to do that. I did actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I figured it out. On the prior classes we were building, I thought I had Control S, but apparently missed something. And so I had to go back and make sure that it's saving on the files. And that was the thing. Because if you get so used to updating some of these tools, it's like, oh, you know, it's like, it went back here.
Oh, okay.
It's another.
And what's the hotkey to launch?
F5.
F5.
So there's a couple of little things I'm going to change, and then I will try to fix things. Did you have a? Yeah.
Same problems.
So for, no, that would be. No,
Yeah, this is what Brown discovered. Yeah. Yeah, I'm retraining myself to say, don't do anything, bring up the part, then bring up that. Yeah, say you did it rewind, yeah, so. That's what you get when you go to destination. It's not a game. Okay. Well, no, I meant. Yeah, we get a. Now it's gone. Do the same thing, let's go to control it, we'll mainly control the cost.
other things that I'll kind of provide some more. You guys have a question too? But I just wanted to show a couple little things. No, yeah, I mean, just literally write mailings in there. So let me go to the mailing controller. If you're getting a null reference, it's because you have to return mailings or it can't see the list. All right, so this ran. Do you want me to run it again? Do you guys have any questions on that part? I want to show you one other thing, and then I'll post it onto GitHub, and then I'll debug for the rest. What? Yeah, I would like, I mean, I would kind of like you to upload it. If you can't get it up into GitHub today, you could just cut and paste the parts you wrote into a doc of some sort and upload that, or even a notepad. I mean, you could do that, but.
So will you do that via an integrated GitHub client?
So what I am thinking, this one's a one-off, right? This is just a show. But what I'm hoping for the actual, once we start doing the assignments, they all build on each other. So just loading them to the same GitHub, making the changes, and then if you give a different commit name each time, I can tell which belongs to the newest commit.
Will you do that through Visual Studio?
I'm actually just thinking of doing it through GitHub. You could, the Visual Studio takes a little learning. I mean, you're welcome to do it through the Visual Studio one if you want. One of the things I wanted to do, if I were to go to the main home index, so let's do home index, and I'm just going to run from there. So this is what you get by default. I'm going to maybe unzoom a touch. All right, so this is the page that you get by default. And there's no link to the page that we just added, right? It just has the home, about, contact. It has the big Bootstrap banner that you can do. It has a whole bunch of stuff about ASP and stuff. You can modify this page a lot. So I'm going to close that. You didn't necessarily want to close everything. Let's just close this. And I'm going to stop it because closing that doesn't stop it. And I'm going to resume. So if you go to, there's the index page here, but there's also shared. So I'm going to go to the shared thing. Whoops, that's not it. I'm going to open the shared folder. I'm going to go to layout. You can change a lot of these. Notice that it has my ASP.NET application, right? So if you want to change that, you could do that. You can get rid of a lot of the stuff that it's saying. But down here where it says nav bar, this is your menu. So if I add at HTML with a capital H dot action link, I can make a link to my page. The first thing is what's going to show up on the menu. So I'm just going to say mailing or whatever. The second thing is the actual folder, well, the actual file name, which in our case will be index, and it needs to be in quotes. And the third thing is the folder, which is mailing. Was it just mailing or mailings? Mailing, right? And then I'm going to close the parentheses. So this is shared layout under views. And the top level menu is here. Okay, so shared mailings menu. So if I run it again, and then I'll come back to that, and then I'll so this is, notice I have mailing now in my menu. You could change application name again. You can change the title to get rid of all of this. But when I click on mailing, it goes to my page. And you can go back home. So you can customize how all of this looks. And you can get rid of the banner. I mean, if you really want to play with the CSS, you could play with it quite a bit too. Okay, so that's all I'm going to show on that. I will put it up on, try to put it up on GitHub. Let's see how that goes. And then I will circulate, and we'll do a little bit of circulating next time. And we need to, on this side, I think we need to set things up. He doesn't seem to have copied the new version.
In the shared layout.
Yeah. So in the shared, there's down in the nav bar. So there's shared and then there's home. There's if you go to the index under home, that's where it has like the ASP, gives you a powerful. I mean, you can change all of that.
You added action. What was it?
So that's in the layout, shared layout, and they're down under the nav bar.
Where does it put our code?
That's what I'm going to go look for real quickly. It's usually under documents projects, but it doesn't seem to be there. So it may be because I'm running from the public folder, kind of like yours. It may be in public documents. One of the ways you can tell, I think, project properties. It's not giving me anything. So typically where these go, I want to do this, is under Visual Studio 27 and then projects. Mine isn't there, so I'm going to go, to see.
Right click on first look and open file and finder.
Okay.
So then you can kind of go through. Oh, it's under app.
So it's settings, build events, package. So under the solution properties, I'm looking for the path. Which one did you do it on here? Or this one? The other way I could do
Oh,
file save as. First look. Steve source repos first look.
yeah, click outside of first look, and then it'll give you the whole C path.
Yeah, I right clicked on first look there, and then there was a open folder in File Explorer down on the bottom.
Oh, okay. So it's Steve source repos first look, first look. Yeah, I would. So it will. We want to do this for the other one. Let's see what happens. It will if you use the Windows tool. With luck, I'm going to try GitHub. You might have to do it in steps. For this one, it's not that important.
Can we link GitHub with this project?
What?
Can we link the project with GitHub repo?
You should be able to. I'm not sure I understood your question, but. All right, so if I were to do a new repository, and I'm going to just call it first look, and I'm going to initialize with a README, create repository, and then I'm going to upload files. We'll see if we can get it. Choose files, which means I have to go find them again. So
Probably under
it was,
users.
yeah, it was under users, yeah. And then it was under Steve, which I don't see.
This
So it isn't there. Am I in? So I'm still in. So if I go to C, users, it doesn't list me as a user. What?
Yeah, that's for mine.
Winter 18.
Source.
Repos first look. Now I don't know if we can do. I'm going to try. The easiest way would be to see if I could download the first look. I don't know that that will work. I'm going to try to open just that whole. Well, I don't want to go all the way there again. See, users, winter 18,
Source.
source. All right, so what else? Repos, and I want to just do the first look. Can I drag? It won't let me just do that, though, will it? It won't let me upload the folder. Because when I open it, goes to. Actually, maybe it will let me open that folder. Just go up one more. Is it going to do it? I think what it's going to do is everything except the folders. Right? So this is doing it from the web page. I know from experience at home, if you use the Windows thing, if you download it, it'll upload it all. So if I do this, what's my commit? I'm just going to say like first commit, and I'll commit the changes. And then what I'm going to do, this is a bit of a pain, but I could do each folder and then upload its contents. So if I do a new folder, so I'm going to create a new file. And what are the folders that I have down there? You know, I don't know if I have to have the app data. Probably do app start. And actually for this one, it's not that important that you have everything. So let's just do model. Is it models or model? Models. So I'm going to do models. One of the things you have to do then is do another slash and just do like readme. It won't let you create an empty folder, so you have to do like readme.txt, and then I can do. So where is it that I want to do that? So edit new file. Don't have to put anything in it, but I'll put some data. I have to go down. I want to commit it. The other thing is you could just pull out the particular. So I'm going to commit the new file. Now in models here, I can upload files, and I can go to, I'll go to the right place this time. So I can go to like models, and I can open that, and it will add that file, and then I can commit it. This is all too big. It's hard to navigate. I'm just going to put first commit also here. And instead of doing everything, I'm going to, then I'll do a create new file, and I'll do controllers, and I'm going to put a slash there and just do a readme. And then I will commit this, which means I have to go way over here. The other thing I think might work is if you, did I commit it? All right. So then I'm going to do upload files for controllers. Just go there, get the controllers. Why is it not showing? Oh, because I need to go up.
Can you just click and drag the files?
So Git is
You can. What?
You don't have access to
I think you can, and which might actually work. You might be able to pull them all up with the bash. So the bash would probably work better. And also, I know if you go to GitHub, then download the Windows client, you can upload everything. It'll do it. It won't give you the things, which I might show you, or we could do the bash. Do you have the bash there? I think you can do it from the terminal, from the command line. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much more time on this because I've wasted a lot of time, but GitHub would be the ideal place. Once you've got the basic folders up there, however you get them up there, and for this assignment, it is not important. I will upload the view because we want to look at the views. But once they're there, then it's not an issue just because the changes we make will be small, right? So I will do the views. I don't think I can drag. Can I drag the views into GitHub? And it worked?
Yeah.
So you might be able to just drag the folders too. I want to go back though to before I drag the folder. So let me commit these. I'm going to go back to first look. I'm going to upload files. Let's see if I can just drag the views in. Yep, that worked. That's actually probably a better way to do it. Just drag the folders in if you're doing it that way.
So the only thing I have in there are the control top and views.
Yeah, for this one, it doesn't matter. For the other one, I would like to have it there so that if worst came to worst, I could download it and run it. But this one doesn't matter. And I'm not going to do the whole thing either. I'm just going to do. All right, so we got first look. I've got controllers, models, and views. I've got all this other stuff that I don't particularly need there. And dragging the views worked. I have the different things. So I have the mailing, and then there's the index view. So it actually dragging the folders in works. Yeah, that's plenty for this one. I want to get you started, but I don't know if we want to start it now. I want to go.
I thought it was.
I'm probably watch some lunch or something. So, what I will do first of all is I'll tell David that this slide didn't get done. And hopefully he can change that, fix them so that we don't have to do it. But if we have to, we can go to Microsoft and download the libraries. And again, if you need help catching up, we can do that. We're going to do everything we're going to do is going to be MVC, but this is a one-off.
So without doing this, they go on.
Yes. Yeah, nothing that we're going to do in the future depends on this one. But I would like you to upload it sometime this quarter, just for the first assignment. If it totally failed you today, you could go to my GitHub and copy the code and upload it because we did it together. I'm not going to worry about it. But so the first assignment is just this one, which the idea was to give you the feel for the environment. All right, that's the main point of this. So if you didn't get it, um, it might be more helpful for you to go through the process and do it and then upload it. But if everything failed, you can just upload these. Or if you have it all there and it's not quite working, you can upload it too. Now, in terms of Canvas, so this is first look. Let's go out. I'm going to go back to the root of this, which is first look. I'm just going to copy that. And in Canvas, which I think I closed at some point, you can just add the link. So let's do. I can't type. I thought I'd hit the wrong character there. So in Canvas, when you do an assignment, so let's just go 172. I'm going to kill my zoom again. Maybe do it. So I need to go real quickly to settings and change to a student view. Okay, so I'm going to turn in first look, and I'm going to do a website URL. Going to do the first look, and I'm going to submit it. And that works really well if you've got the GitHub stuff.
Just those 3 files.
Yeah, just those 3 files are fine for now. And it says you're late, but don't worry about that. That's partially because of the virtual machine problems. What? Yeah, that for this one, if you just have the code that we wrote, you know, basically, so the model view and the controller.
A link to the GitHub repository is all we have to submit.
That's all you have to submit.
Steve, I know like 2 days ago, you linked your Visual Studio to the Community Assist database.
We're gonna do it.
We're gonna do that.
Yeah,
Okay,
we'll
great.
do it next time. Next time we'll add databases.
As a part of getting my stuff set up at home was getting
So
the
there's
SQL and Visual Studio.
yeah, if you do
installed so that I can
if you do server viewer or
Server Explorer.
server explorer
And
database, and then just do add data where it says data connections.
then here.
Add connection. You want it to the data source should be like it's not a file.
Okay.
It's SQL Server. And then in this case it will be
Oh, you had to start typing it, I think, right?
yeah, it takes like 30 seconds to time out. They may come up, but it still takes like 30 seconds. And if it doesn't come up, it's /SQL Express.
Okay, that's right.
And then down here you should be able to choose the database.
Okay.
So that was a little bit more chaotic than I meant.
So Steve, what was it in the, from the top here? Just one. So I just filled the repo here, so. What about just copy over and just.
So we could just do, right now, I would just do like the controllers. Actually, try when I try first
It's weird because all these classes blend together, right? And yeah, if you're programming, like, it's
Oh, try it. Oh, okay.
So basically, this is so dot/SQL Express. So do you have try local host?
Yeah, mine says it can't connect.
And Express, you did a dot backslash. What can't connect?
It said,
Okay. Cancel. Yeah. Might be able to go
I'll tell you what it says.
No, yeah, right there. Go to computer network. Just make sure it's right on.
Yeah, so it doesn't.
And let's do services. Services. We want to look for secrets. I'm wondering if we only installed the tools and not the actual database. Let's look at the. So I don't see any there. Let's look at those. It's not looking the same. Let's go down to the SQL server. All right, so you got SQL server. Yes, so we're down to that. Let's look into the so that permission, so we don't have, we have everything except, I think you downloaded all the tools, so I'm not sure you downloaded the server. Yeah, you don't have to install the tools. They're just because they're all there. Just the server. Yeah. Oh, sure. That's fine. Yeah, so do I need to give it back or sign it? Yeah, so I'll sign it. I think you give it back to. But yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, the only thing was that Python class that I thought I wasn't gonna pass, I like barely passed.
Oh,
so,
good.
Yeah, which is awesome. But I could have used extra time in that for sure. So
Yeah, well, I'll give you what time you need. So
yeah, I know. Thank you.
yeah, and I'll sign it. Was today a little bit weird for the. How did your thing? Did you get it set up? Okay.
Yeah. I think it's going fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna review a little bit of my own.
Yeah, it was a little bit crazy today. But
I mean, it makes sense.
good.
The Java class that I had. set
Oh,
me up
Java
for-
should help a lot. Yeah.
I had 115 last quarter. So I'm following. It's just the C sharp.
Yeah, and
Sometimes confusing.
it's a little confusing, but it's actually really similar to Java.
It's really, yeah. It just takes a moment. The curly brace